Right, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the, I guess this is the third occurrence of the Public Safety Radio Strategic Planning Committee for 2025. I'm a little bit concerned about the number of people in the room for quorum, so what we'll do is we'll start off with a roll call and see how we look, and then if we're short on the quorum, then we will give a few minutes to see if we can drum up another attendee, and see where it goes from there. Obviously, if we don't make quorum, then we can't conduct the meeting. And so I think with that being said, I'll go ahead and get started with the roll call. And actually, I think we might be in good shape because I think our friends from finance just stepped in. And therefore, we could have a seventh representative on. Okay, CAL FIRE. Okay, all right. So, okay, so I think we'll we should be good. If you want to take a chair over here, just beginning with roll call. So starting off, I'll start from Highway Patrol.
Captain Joshua Tippett.
Thank you, sir. From the Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation.
Michael Chick, Section Chief.
All right, thank you. From the Department of Technology.
Victor Krause.
Thank you. From the Emergency Medical Services Authority. From the Department of Finance.
Mary Halterman, Assistant Program Budget Manager.
All right, thank you. From the Department of Fish and Wildlife.
Good morning, John Chapman, Telecom Systems Manager.
Thank you. From the Department of Forestry and Fire Protection.
Chris Hardy, Staff Chief, Command Control.
Thank you. From the Department of Justice. Thank you. From the Military Department. From the Department of Public Health.
Good morning, Roberto Tofoletti, the IT manager over CPR.
Thank you. From the Department of Parks and Recreation.
Good morning, Paul Whistler, Assistant Chief, Telecommunications.
Thank you. From the Department of Transportation.
Good morning, Ferdinand Milanes. Apologize for not being there in person. Have another meeting at noon. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. From the Department of Water Resources.
Yes, Matthew Fairbairn.
Thank you. All right. So I'm counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 of the 13 members are present. Therefore, we do have a quorum. So thank you all for joining. This is, as I mentioned, the third Public Safety Radio Strategic Planning Committee meeting of 2025. The first order of business is the approval of the meeting minutes from the August meeting that we had. You should have all had an opportunity to look at those and review them. Are there any concerns with the meeting minutes from the last meeting that need to be addressed? All right, hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the meeting minutes? I hear a motion here. Do I have a second? Thank you. So we have a motion and a second. Then, is there anyone from the public who would like to discuss the motion on the table to approve the meeting minutes from the last meeting? All right. Hearing none, we will then proceed to a roll call vote to approve the meeting minutes. And I will start with Highway Patrol. In favor or opposed? In favor. All right. Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. All right. That's 2 approvals. Department of Technology. All right. Department of Finance.
Approved.
Thank you. Department of Fish and Wildlife.
Approved.
Thank you. Forestry and Fire Protection. Thank you. Department of Justice. Thank you. Department of Parks and Recreation. Thank you. And everybody else was online, and so from a voting perspective, not being in the room doesn't allow you to cast a vote in this. That being said, of the members who are present, we have a unanimous vote to approve the meeting minutes. And so the motion carries. We will then make those available online following the meeting. Thank you. And we will move on to the next item on our agenda. So this is an opportunity for public comment for matters that are on the agenda. So is there any member in the audience here in the room who would like an opportunity to make a comment on the items that are on the agenda for discussion today? All right, seeing no takers on that, how about online? Is there anyone who would like to make a comment online? All right, seeing and hearing none online, we will then move on from the third agenda item to the fourth agenda item, and this is a legislative update. Looking for the representative from Cal OES Legislative Affairs. You'll join us here at the dais.
Thank you, Steve. Good morning. Paul McGinnis, Legislative Coordinator with Cal OES. I'll be providing just a brief legislative update. I'll give a few key legislative dates, as well as a few state bills that I'll share action on, and federal bills that we're currently tracking. Also, a side note, we have all of our bills that we track as well as analyze are available to view on our Cal OES Legislative Affairs website, and I'll include a link to that in the document that we sent out after the meeting. So the governor's deadline to act on all measures that were put on his desk was October 13th this year. All statutes, excluding those that had an urgency clause, will take effect January 1st of 2026. The legislature will reconvene on January 5th, and then the governor's proposed budget will be released no later than January 10th of 2026. I'm now going to go into just a few bills, give an overview of actions taken. So the first one is AB 330. This bill extended the operation of the Local Prepaid Mobile Telephony Services Collection Act until January 1st, 2031. That bill was signed by the governor on October 10th. Next is AB 645, Assemblymember Carrillo. This bill requires by January 1st, 2027, a public safety agency that provides 911 call processing services for emergency medical response to provide pre-arrival medical instructions to 911 callers that are requiring medical assistance, and then also specifies the medical assistance that's required. That bill was signed by the governor on October 3rd. Next state bill is AB 727. This bill, starting on July 1st, 2026, requires public schools, grades 7 to 12, and public institutions of higher ed that issue ID cards to additionally have printed on those cards the telephone number and text line for specified LGBTQ plus suicide hotline. And that bill was authored by Assemblymember Gonzalez and was signed by the governor on October 10th. So those bills were chaptered and signed that I've been reporting on for the last couple of meetings. Next is just 4 federal bills that we're tracking. HR 540, the 911 Saves Act from Rep. Norma Torres. This would require the director of the Office of Management and Budget to review and make certain revisions to the standard occupational classification system for public safety telecommunicators to be reclassified as first responders. That bill is currently in the House Committee on Education and Workforce. Next is HR 2937. Representative Robin Kelly would require Secretary of Health and Human Services to improve the detection, prevention, and treatment of mental health issues among public safety telecommunicators. This bill is currently in the House Committee on Energy and Commerce. Next is S290. Representative John Barrasso would direct the Secretary of the Interior to upgrade existing emergency communication centers in units of National Park System to next-gen 911 systems, as well as for other purposes. That bill is also in the Committee on Energy and Natural Resources. And the last bill I'd like to share with the committee is S666. The First Responders Wellness Act would increase access to mental health, substance abuse, and counseling services for first responders and for other purposes. That bill is in the Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions. So I'm happy to take any questions from the committee at this time. That concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Any questions from the panel? All right, seeing none, thank you. We will move on then to the next item on our agenda. Item number 5, this is the California Radio Interoperable System, and specifically the design concept. We've been talking about the CRIS system for a few meetings in a row here, and so I think this will continue that conversation. We've got David Andre coming up to the microphone now. I think so. It's live.
Now it's live.
Oh, there we go.
Okay, good morning, everybody. For those of you that don't know me, I'm David Andre, Client Engineering Unit Division Chief. I'm going to go over the CRIS design concept and some other slides here. I'm going to stick around after the meeting if there's questions, but of course I'm available during the meeting as well. So, consistent with State Administrative Manual, Section 4530, PSC has developed and implemented CRIS to accommodate multiple state agencies. We believe this will give us the ability to leverage purchasing power, maximize the use of infrastructure, and reduce redundant and duplicative networks. The purpose of the system, it's a statewide P25 Phase 2 trunked radio system providing interoperable voice communications for public safety agencies. That's TDMA. And it's been designed to enhance interoperability among state, local, and federal partners during day-to-day operations and major incidents. The system overview, the architecture, it's a dual core architecture for reliability and continuity. The primary core is in Sacramento, the backup core is in LA, and all RF sites at the mountaintops have been connected via the state microwave system to both cores, which provides a redundant backhaul across state microwave. So I want to talk about Smart Connect integration. Smart Connect is a Motorola feature. We have a Motorola system.
Oh, David, hold on a second, if you would. Because that's the next agenda item, right?
Yep.
So let's pause for a second here with agenda item 5, that last slide that was up there. So is there any questions or comments from the panel on the design concepts around the system and specifically the goal of trying to maximize the state's investment by having shared infrastructure?
There's a hand up.
All right.
I think we understand the concept. I think the questions continue to be capability and testing.
Okay, so can you elaborate on the capability piece for us, please?
Connectivity in all areas and all features and functions. I think some of the, and again, I don't have recent data on this. I can just go back from some of our early conversations. Right. That's really been the biggest resistance. If you want to use that word from my end is, does it work when we need it to work, where we need it to work? And then when not, then we have to move to other options.
Right.
So I understand the concept is to try to make it work everywhere as best we can for as many devices and as many channels.
Right. Yep. Okay. Yeah, so I think, that's, the point's well taken, that you need it to work where you're activities take you. And short of that, then you don't see an opportunity to transition parts of the organization onto it prior to that.
I don't think that's what I said, and I think we're already transitioning portions. I think DAPL's been one of our units that is heavily tested and provided videos.
Okay. Yeah.
Don't mistake my concern for
Yeah.
lack of
Yeah.
interest.
No, just clarifying is all.
100%. And at the end of the day, let's break it down. So where it works and where it works well, then there's an advantage to it. And I don't think anybody expected a magic wand for it to suddenly do everything day one.
Yep.
But it has been a progression, and I think last time you guys showed us some maps of the capability.
Yeah.
So I just think it's increasing, and that's great. We're heading in the right direction.
Yeah, well, and I think, that kind of feedback is important for the design team to be able to then take, not just your specific feedback from corrections or specific feedback from any of the agencies, but to take in all of that feedback and then plot a course for how do we then deploy the resources that we do have to make the best use for all of the agencies. And so I think, your point about system availability in specific locations is valid. And, a future that has blanket coverage all over the state of California is, I think a worthy goal to pursue, but the reality of ever getting to that point is, if it could have been done with radio infrastructure, I don't know that we would be building right now because it would have already been accomplished. So building our way to that isn't going to be done on the legacy infrastructure. And so that's part of the reason, I think, with this program, why we are entertaining alternative technologies that haven't traditionally been involved in public safety radio communications. And so, and I think one of the corollary to a point you were making was, as we do continue to expand, then the adoption of it is revisited by all of the agencies. And so looking at that, how do we maximize adoption within the resources that we have? And so I think part of the reason that it comes up in this conversation is that we are looking holistically at the state level. So the investment that California makes into communications is kind of the angle that we're coming from here. And sometimes the decisions that are made are going to be made in such a way that they benefit a large segment of California public safety agencies, but an individual agency might not get the exact thing that they're asking for at any one time. And so, but having that feedback helps us to get to a system that does meet all of the needs. And sometimes it'll be in different ways than just the legacy technology. So, okay, any other questions on topic number 5?
Yeah, I had a question. The CRIS system is being adopted by Mono County. Can we speak to that? We've been preparing for that transition to happen and haven't heard any updates. But our agency works in Mono County quite a bit. There's a lot of fish, a lot of wildlife, and a lot of people that come from the Los Angeles area and quadruple the population during openers.
Yep.
And the staff that are there that manage that county are desperately in need of our resources and our support during those periods.
Yeah.
And we want to be able to communicate with them because we will be using their courts and their jails and their resources that they have available there. So we need to be able to communicate with those folks that are operating those.
Yeah. No, it's a good point. I don't know, David, if you have off the top of your head a little bit of data about how things are going with the Mono County.
Sure, yeah. The total build is going to be about 11 sites, 6 of which we put in early on. The other 5 came in conjunction with the agreement with Mono County. And I think we turned up 3 out of those 5 sites over the summer. They haven't cut over to CRIS fully, but they do have test radios that are programmed up. And we've been working with them all summer to help them iron out the bugs on their end to fully cut over in Mono County.
So, sounds like about a third of the way through lighting up all of the sites that are planned for
I'd say 8 or 9 out of 11 of the
Okay.
sites are in wide area trunking.
Okay, and then continuing on getting the rest of them turned up over the next, probably after winter breaks, right?
Correct.
Yeah, so, so in the high country, when winter comes along, it makes it difficult to install infrastructure at the mountaintops, and so a lot of the hilltop work doesn't get done during the winter for that reason. So once the thaw hits in the spring, then additional work can be completed out there, and I think then you'll see more progress. But more, I think, to your point, was having information shared, right? And so that you're apprised on a regular basis of the status of that particular project would be helpful.
It is a full CRIS system.
Yeah.
So therefore, the appraisal will probably come from PSC,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
Yeah, that's what we're looking for.
Okay.
And if you're doing that in any other counties, we'd like to know about that too.
Sure. All right. Yeah, we can take that as an action item that we will continue to make sure that we're communicating status. This body talks a great deal about strategic developments, and so I don't know that it necessarily needs to be an agenda item here, right? But it just making sure that we're communicating with all of our stakeholders about the status of the system and any new areas that we're lighting up coverage would be beneficial.
So is it safe to assume even those advancements potentially enable larger organizations like CHP and CDCR in those areas? So I think they're directly relevant to us understanding what the capabilities are statewide.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I think, if I'm not mistaken, a future agenda item will get into what the coverage footprint looks like. And so perhaps with everyone's consent, we'll move forward in the agenda. Oh, yeah, one other, yeah.
One quick comment to piggyback on Fish and Wildlife has been a bit of the goals of CRIS are definitely admirable, and we're very interested in the system. One of our challenges with rollout has been integration as a department with other regional encrypted radio networks and trunked radio systems on a statewide basis. Potentially, and I guess a question for the CRIS unit is, are we working with those regional radio networks such as MIRA, LA-RICS, et cetera, to integrate several P25 systems on a statewide basis and moving as a singular group instead of potentially as a department one-by-one piecemeal approach? And it's been a challenge for our department.
Yeah, actually we are. In fact, we're in the middle of rolling out an ISSI connection to LA-RICS. They were gracious enough to pay for the licensing, and we have been working directly with our vendor to obtain licensing of our own to leverage and connecting other RCSs.
Thank you.
And on that topic, I'll mention this for everyone's edification. I'm aware that many of the agencies at the state level end up having to enter into contractual agreements to use the systems that we're talking about. So there will be some of the agencies entering into an agreement to have users on the CRIS system, or I'm sorry, on LA-RICS or on the San Diego RCS. And so all of those taken together end up being the type of use of state resources that I think we look at here when we're planning a centrally, deployed system that many people can use, is because if we can, build a system that interacts with those other systems, then we don't have to enter into contracts separately and pay an additional licensing cost to all those other systems. And I think that's an opportunity for us to, as a state, to make better use of the limited resources that we have if we can get to that point where we're interconnected and not have to then have subscriber fees on all of those systems. So a little bit of context for that conversation.
But I think we're struggling with the same thing is some of those jurisdictions, to be quite frank, don't feel any obligation to work with Cal OES PSC.
Yeah.
So we have to establish those relationships ourselves for our own business purposes. And I too would be interested in having a larger conversation about how do we get them on board? What's their hesitation? Some of it has to do with just administrative access. They don't want to give up keys.
Yeah.
I mean, we know how it's working.
Yeah.
It's a valid point. We should, as a statewide consideration, we should be having a conversation. Is there something we can do in that regard, and what's the action that we need to take?
Right.
Support moving forward. Sorry, I have a question from Fire Chief Jesse Corrales.
Oh, yeah.
He's asking, do we anticipate costs with the programming for state agencies in regards to Chris? Obviously, he's asking how would the agency budget for that? Obviously, we would expect if it's a large amount of cost we have to plan for that we haven't foreseen, we would do a budget change proposal. And then his final question is, would Chris be mandatory? So I know on the cost perspective, we've talked about this early on, as a method of getting folks to participate, then Chris was offered at free, but at some point, there's going to be a cost associated with it. I think that's what his question is asking.
Right.
I'm not going to, so that's the one question. The other one is the mandatory aspect of this.
So I'll take them in reverse order.
Okay.
There is no mandate to use Chris specifically. There is a mandate to get your radio communications needs met through public safety communications. So our number one approach to solutioning a communication need for a public safety agency is going to be the Chris system, because it ties back into the use of resources in a way that makes the most sense and gets the economies of scale for the state of California. And so having that one system that serves many, so that we don't have to continue to invest in and maintain separate systems for each of the agencies, is where this system comes in. But there is no mandate to use that system. It is a mandate to come to us, and we will come up with a solution that makes sense for your business case. So you come with your business requirements, and PSC will then develop a set of technical specifications to solution those needs. That's sort of, in a nutshell, how we're approaching it right now. The other question is, during this time where we have funding coming to us through the normal state budget processes to operate this system, that means deploy it and get people onto it. Part of that has been, buying subscriber devices that we can loan to agencies who want to test it out. Part of it is programming up devices that agencies already have to access the system. And so that's been covered under the program that we have right now. And we are currently operating under a budget change proposal that has been in place for about a year and a half. It has about 2.5 years remaining on it. And during that period of time, we will continue that practice. After that, and this was one of the fundamental concepts of this system, was there would be an opportunity to then collect revenue from subscriber fees in the future. And so during the time that we have funding appropriated to us, we don't collect those subscriber fees. Once the appropriation is gone, then the subscriber fees are intended to maintain the system. So at that point, there wouldn't be the funding to do the programming for the agencies.
So just thinking of the budget cycle, you're saying you have a little over 2 years left on that DCP?
Correct.
And it takes sometimes 1.5 years to get a budget change proposal approved? Sounds like we're going to have to be forecasting here next year.
Correct. Yeah, so yeah, I would have it on your horizon that you should be thinking up a concept, if you need to, for the budget cycle that comes after this one.
Is there an option to opt out of that? I know right now we have to put that on our radios, that we're doing that right now, and it's free. Obviously, we just have to do the paperwork. When the time comes that we have a feed, we're not using we have use cases and things like that, but we're not using it to the scale.
Right.
Would we be able to opt out of that?
Yeah, so I mean, it kind of ties into the idea of whether it's mandatory or not. And yeah, there is no mandate to use it. What we're hoping is to demonstrate enough value to all of the public safety agencies during this time that they will see it as a good investment of their resources. And part of the way we do that is to continue to expand the coverage footprint, integrate with other systems that people, agencies need to use. And, if we can get to, some alternative technologies that are reliable enough to be deemed public safety grade, then we incorporate those into the system. And those are the fronts that I think will allow us to expand the system to the point where it does demonstrate the value for each of the agencies. I know with fire specifically, you know, where your frontline operations take you is in places that are, you know, could be anywhere. And because that's the case, then there's a good chance that you're going to end up someplace where we haven't installed a hilltop repeater, much less installed, you know, a microwave backbone site. So that obviously is something we need to plan for, and I think that's where the alternative technologies come in. If we can, like I said, prove those out to where they're reliable enough to put in a public safety agent's hands, then they'll be incorporated into the system. And so we're exploring all of those technologies now with the hope that we can come up with a way of expanding it to the point where even fire, you know, I know, you know, like in the initial iteration of CRIS, we focused on population centers and highways. And that was where, you know, the main thrust of us deploying our coverage footprint went. But then after that, then we start, you know, once we hit the, you know, 90% of the population benchmark and 60% of the geography benchmark, then now we're looking at places that is harder to get to in terms of providing a coverage footprint. And so, and, you know, one of the things that's, you know, a limiting factor for us is we're not going to be able to build our way out of this in terms of building, you know, radio, you know, towers and vaults on hilltops where they don't exist. It's the timeline for deploying a new hilltop site is rather protracted. So that's where the alternative technologies come from. That's a long way of saying part of our mandate right now is to explore those alternative technologies so that we can reach places that traditionally with legacy infrastructure we couldn't get to. So yeah, in a nutshell, we're working to get there. We're not going to require you to use a system that doesn't serve your business needs, but we're trying to build a system that will serve your business needs so that you can make use of it.
I think probably the other state agency partners that I have in here are in the same boat I am, really. I mean, we're in those areas,
Yes.
all of us are, to go holistically.
Right.
We would not be able to do that
Right.
until we have that ability. The other part for, at least on the CAL FIRE side,
Mhm.
is we use a lot of our private sector
Mhm.
to do our businesses, you know, for firefighting and all that kind of stuff, and those individuals do not have, they're gonna be legacy radio for a long time.
Right,
And how do we integrate that if we're gonna go to full scale?
right.
That's something just on your radar
Mhm.
to think about. If we were to go that direction, we would have to have that ability with the legacy partners.
Yeah, well, and knowing that each of them, you know, essentially is making a decision that makes the best sense for their practices. And so, you know, I think because of that, the transition to get to where it's 100% adoption is longer than most. But we're going to continue to, you know, build a system that keeps adding functionality so that we can get there. And, you know, I think it's worth noting here that when we talk about transitioning your operations onto the CRIS system away from, you know, a legacy system, the way we're approaching it here at PSC is that we want you to come onto the system where it makes sense, when it makes sense. And so I don't want, you know, people to transition onto the system if their operations are in an area where there is no coverage. That, you know, would not serve any purpose. And so that's not what we're talking about. And I think as we bring people onto the system, we learn more and more about, you know, where the need is. And, you know, like we can show diagrams and, you know, zoom in on those diagrams even to a certain extent, and it'll show us, okay, there's a coverage plot that covers this area, but, you know, that's a model that a computer is generating. Where the rubber meets the road is out there with somebody with a device in their hand pushing the button, and getting that data is, you know, you have to actually go out to those places and push the button and collect that data and bring it back. And I think Later on in the program today, we'll have some data that represents that kind of activity from the team to show what we're experiencing. And so anytime that you have units, I know you mentioned paroles was one of the things, and fire, I think from your side also, Mike, has looked at the CRIS system for its operations. Obviously, we're trying to, transition large segments of highway patrol onto the system. And so as we're doing this, we're getting a lot of data that comes back in, and that's then feeding into the design process so that we can hit the places and make the best use of the resources to provide the most benefit. So.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, because I think there was either, it seemed like an agenda or perhaps a misunderstanding about the intent.
Mm-hmm.
For example, I think statements were made at some of the lower technical levels around, we have to put CRIS on every single radio. Well, that doesn't align to what you just said about paying for CRIS and having it licensed on the radios where it makes sense, where it operationally provides value. So I'm very glad to hear that.
Yeah, well, to elaborate on that point, I think the nuance that might be missing from that is there's two tiers of service on the CRIS system. There's what we're referring to as a primary user, and that is somebody who has custom talk groups on the system and uses it for their day-to-day operations to talk with their people. And so they've come in and had some design work done and want to use it regularly. That's a primary user. That's where the subscription fee comes in. The secondary user is somebody who's on it just for interoperability's sake. And so that would be if you're responding to an incident that's multi-jurisdictional, and you need to work with partners from other agencies on that incident to stabilize the situation. Maybe it's a large traffic accident, maybe it's an earthquake, floods come to mind, fires a lot of times would fit that bill. The interoperability only user does not pay a subscription fee. And the reason for that is we don't want to put a $ in the way of having interoperable communications to respond to these incidents. So there's the two tiers. One is a paid tier. One is a free tier. Never will have a fee associated with it. And so again, responding to these emergent situations can't have a $ in front of it. But if you're going to use it for day-to-day operations and need to have custom work done, then that's where the primary subscriber comes in.
Thank you. That makes a lot more sense.
Yeah.
Is there any idea of what that fee would be, or is it?
So, yeah, I mean, at one time or another, we've calculated a number, but it hasn't been in recent years that we have gone to through the exercise of calculating that. What it really boils down to would be the operating costs of the system and spreading those out over the number of primary subscribers on the system. And when we do that, you have to have a couple of pieces of data pretty well pinned down to get that answer. And right now, with the state of the system growing as fast as it is and doing so under funding that's been specifically appropriated through a couple of budget change proposals. That's one of the reasons why we haven't refreshed that number. As we come to a point where we begin collecting subscription fees, then we will refresh that number and we'll use the number of subscriber devices who are on the system at that time to then calculate what that will be. Our goal is to make it very competitive within the landscape of subscription fees for regional communication systems. We want to come in very low in that range to make it affordable for as many people as possible. And so one of the ways we do that is by getting large numbers of people on the system. So the larger number of subscribers, the lower per subscriber fee will be. So that's part of the reason why we're pushing for adoption and making adoption available now as a cost that's covered by the program, so that people get an opportunity to experience the system, see how it works, see the value in it, and before they have to make a decision with funding from their own resources to, to figure out, is it worth it to our operational budget to be a subscriber of this? So, yeah, we want to have a fair evaluation, and so that's what we're doing. So as we get closer to that time, we will recalculate the number and socialize that in advance so that people have, a budget cycle's worth of time to figure that out. I don't want to surprise anybody at the last minute. And so, yeah, we will be working those numbers and sharing that information as the time comes.
I guess point of clarification on number one, yes, I appreciate the budget numbers and having those in advance because frankly, there's a competition with these regional radio networks. If I get better coverage at a lower cost, that's a budget decision that our agency has to make. But also a point of clarification on the mandate. You mentioned 2 tiers of service, one for an interoperability and then another for specific custom talk groups. On a statewide level, if we're programming a statewide load of radios, is there an associated cost for all of our users on a statewide basis, even if we're not using the CRIS network on a custom talk group in that area per se? So North Coast Redwoods would have a specific talk group. They're not on CRIS, whereas our Angeles district may be on CRIS, but they have the same radio programming. Would that be potentially spread out amongst all of our users, irregardless of their use of the system, or?
Yeah, so the way that it's managed here is and David, feel free to correct me if I misspeak here, but it's at what we describe as the code plug level. And so we build a programming load, and if it includes custom talk groups in it, then that is a primary subscriber.
Yeah, I think the additional answer is if half of your subscribers are primary, then we would bill for those half of the subscribers, where if the other half were secondary, then they would still be free.
In that case, are we planning on an expansion of the number of code plugs we have around the state with various ones, or?
That's customer specific, so I always try and recommend coming up with the fewest number of code plugs possible per agency to keep your costs down. But yeah, if you have half your radios with a park specific talk group, then they would have a different code plug than the interoperable only.
Understood. That definitely would be a challenge for the agencies in expansion of the number of code plugs and the changes more regionally based on our needs for that. So just bringing, I guess, that to the table at this point. And then back to the mandate for that, there's currently a memo on file requiring CRIS programming in all of our new code plugs and programming rolling out to the field, which is leads back to the first comment I made earlier with the interoperability issues of having keys and having unlocked and locked again and working with the various agencies there where we're not working with conventional systems anymore and they're trunked, and it's been a challenge. But that is one just consideration on a statewide basis is the code plugs and expansion of the number of code plugs and complexity of those based on CRIS usage in one area and not in another.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of good points. I think, we're taking down these types of feedback so that we can start to, address, when we start building these policy prescriptions, we're starting with this big middle section of the distribution, and then these edge cases have to get, folded in through having conversations like this. So I think it's helpful to have these conversations. We're always open to having these kind. As concerns the mandate, the MOU that's on file, just for everybody's awareness, the point behind that is getting the interoperable talk groups into as many devices as possible. So we're not mandating anybody become a primary subscriber on the system. It's just so that they have, if a device is capable of affiliating with the CRIS system, then we want it to have those interoperable talk groups in it so they can be used in response to these incidents that occur in multi-jurisdictional ways. So that's the reasoning behind that. So just if there's a listener online or out in the audience who wants to understand that backdrop a little bit more. Thank you. Any other questions on, looks like we have one online. Oh.
Hey, good morning. Yeah, this is John Sweet with CAL FIRE, joining you remotely. Hopefully you can hear me. Really appreciated that conversation. Yeah, thank you, Steve. I really appreciated that conversation. And would like to kind of draw back to what Chief Hardy had mentioned, and especially the last comment that you had just made. I think we know for Wildland Fire, you know, CAL FIRE is looking for a platform. We're looking primarily at the BKR 9000 as an interoperable platform, which we might see in the future adopt some of this capability. Though I think to some points made earlier, I'm really curious if it's not in the MOU that we're absolutely required to even have the interoperable talk groups. It would, I think, be preferable that if it's not required, that as we build the code plugs, because we might say that there's no costs with that, with subscription fees for that, but then there certainly is, depending on if whether or not we're going to build code plugs for, you know, an interoperable radio. You know, I could just kind of reference a recent cost estimate for doing just that was kind of mind-boggling and really unneeded for us at this time. So I think to kind of cut this, get right to the point on that one, if it's possible and not within the MOU that we're required to even use the interoperable talk groups and there's no subscription fees for it right now, I think it would be in our interest that we don't build a code plug for our BKR 9000s that have Chris on it, with the goal in the future of using it in that capacity. But there's still a long way to go before we can implement in such a way. That was my first piece. And Steve, I don't know if you're able to comment on that. Yeah, I think what you had just said earlier was that it's not mandated. However, I think you closed us out with that. You're looking to put Chris on any all band radio.
Yeah, so specifically, yeah, the mandate has two pieces. And just to clarify on those two pieces, there is no mandate for anybody to be a primary subscriber to the system and pay the subscription fee. There is a mandate for any state agency who has a device that is capable of affiliating with the CRIS system to have the interoperability or secondary user talk groups programmed into their device. And the way we handle that is we take the code plug or programming file and the program here using the resources for deploying the system and building a user base. We covered the cost of adding those talk groups to your existing code plug. So there should be no cost to any state user to be able to add interoperability only talk groups to a code plug that they currently have. And so that's a nuance I think that may not have come across in the comment is.
We are paying a large sum to add those two radios currently on the 207 that we have to do for just that.
So
paperwork
yeah.
Associated to it and the teach radio, all
Okay.
that's being charged to the agency currently, but in a radio we're not utilizing the function. That's where John's going with
Okay.
it. So
We will, yeah. We'll look into that because unless, like, the only way that it would make any kind of sense to me to charge you at all is if you're a primary user. Now, if you are, and we're not collecting those subscriptions right now. When it comes to code plug development, if it's not an existing code plug that you're requesting, then you're making a new code plug yourself, then you're paying for that code plug. We will bolt on the interoperability channels to that at our cost. So that should not cost you. So we'll go back and look at that to make sure that it's going that way, because that's how it should be going. If it's not going that way, we want to fix it.
I don't think it is current.
Right, yeah, okay, so, yeah, we can go back and take a look and make sure that it's operating the way it's intended, because you're right, I don't want to, charge people for multiple code plug development, knowing that it's not an inexpensive proposition.
Correct.
So, yeah, thank you for those comments.
I'd like to add a comment.
Steve,
Go
it
ahead,
just,
John.
yeah, thank you very much. I just had one other question or comment here. Curious about maybe public safety communications position on decategorizing mountaintop repeater sites as public safety facilities. Reason I ask is that I understand that there is some interest in doing so, predicated on PSC's implementation of CRIS, right, with its redundant pathways through MPLS and overlapping coverage. I don't, Steve, if you're able to comment on if PSC has that position. And I think what I'm interested in, is how that accounts for perhaps an agency with, right, a relatively sizable portion or proportion of mountaintop repeater sites that are not connected via microwave or standalone, and if there's some analysis on of those types of sites, if there is in fact overlapping coverage, if they were to go down and were to become, in a state of, if they were not built or constructed to have public safety facility features among them. Hopefully I asked that well enough.
Yeah, I think I have an idea of what you're talking about. And so I think it ties in with the Essential Services Act and the nuances that are specific to that. And I am not prepared to discuss that today. So I think we can take that as an action item to go back and do some follow-up analysis and have I think an agenda item in the future that talks about where we are with that. Because I mean, you make a good point in terms of the ones that aren't actually networked into the microwave system, and by virtue of where they're at and their field of fire might not have overlapping coverage, and so we'll do some work on that and add it for the next one.
We can even take that offline if it doesn't apply to anything else. I mean, that's just something we're dealing with currently on a new site.
Okay.
Obviously, that'll benefit us in the future if we don't have to regulate it by some of that.
Right. Yeah. Okay. No, thank you. John, I know you had.
To the point we were discussing a moment ago about CRIS, we've been mandated for the last, I believe, 3 years to purchase the trunking features for the APX radios.
Yes.
That only serve one thing and one thing only. That is CRIS interoperability.
Yes.
So we are incurring the costs of having CRIS interoperability, both from a physical standpoint of purchasing those features, but also the fee to put those on radios. Additionally, to maintain this interoperability CRIS code plug that's separate from the radios that do not have the trunking features in them because they were not purchased with them, because we were surprised when CRIS came about. We were not in a meeting like this where the plans and ideas of advancing technology, they were not occurring back then.
So I'm hearing that your experience right now is an improvement over the past because you're in a dialogue now.
Yes.
All right.
We've gone back in time to where Mr. Spick was a part of the communication that happened within the state.
So, I think your point's well taken that this this body, having met sporadically for a number of iterations and perhaps not been as much of a dialogue and robust conversation as we would like it to be. And I think that kind of hits on some of my goals for this meeting series, is to make it more useful for all of us, so that, you know, it's something that we look forward to coming and having this conversation and sorting out some of these, you know, broad topics that cut across multiple agencies. So your other point had to do with the feature sets that are included in the devices that end up being a cost above what you normally would choose.
Correct.
And yeah, that, in order to have a specific device licensed with the feature set that make it access the CRIS system, the vendor does require a marginal increase of licensing on all of those devices. And you know, the idea there is that it's an investment in interoperability that's happening at the state level. And so I think, had it been communicated to you in advance, you could have then prepared accordingly.
We would have adjusted the BCP accordingly.
Exactly, yeah. So that's the preparation I'm talking about. And so that issue traces itself back to the older situation where the dialogue wasn't as robust, and we didn't have, you know, this engagement the way we're doing now and wanting to continue to do. And so, you know, obviously, you know, we can't go back and change that. But I think the goal of having state devices at least available as interoperable users on the system makes California safer and responds to the needs of Californians better. And that is worth the cost. But it wasn't communicated well and timely. And we can commit to fixing that problem. So thank you for bringing that up. Okay. Any other questions on topic number 5? All right. Then we will advance in the agenda. Topic number 6, Smart Connect integration. Mr. Andre, if you will proceed, sir.
Okay, so Smart Connect is a Motorola feature that allows Apex Series P25 radios to automatically switch between LMR and broadband networks. And we're defining that as LTE, Wi-Fi, or satellite. The dual mode operation, you know, again, it automatically allows the radio to automatically switch when LMR coverage is lost, and so the user can remain on the talk group that he's using, and his identity, his radio alias stays the same. This ensures better connectivity in weak or no LMR coverage areas. So, for example, deep indoors, remote areas, underdeveloped areas, by routing the voice communications over LTE, Wi-Fi, or satellite. There is an order of preference there. It keeps CRIS talk groups active even when the user leaves the LMR coverage area. And the automatic transition doesn't require any user interaction. Your radio basically beeps and then you're on LTE. So we prioritize LMR when the user prefers that. It's a feature in the code plug. That's Smart Connect. There's a diagram there basically depicting how your LTE traffic is routed back to the CRIS core in Sacramento or LA. And so we consider this a CRIS feature. I have several more slides on Smart Connect. Still item agenda 6, so if we skip to the next slide, there we go. Last PISRespect meeting, CHP came and brought this great map. I added the legend by going back and reviewing the verbal comments that were made. So the green is where there's LMR coverage, the blue is where there's LTE roaming, and then orange where there was no LTE available but low band worked, and red where there was no coverage at all. So we compared this to the CRIS coverage plots that we put on our website and zoomed in on all the areas and found that there was a strong correlation. So our data matched CHP's presentation. We also did field surveys to validate the findings. And so specifically, I'll point out the Stockton area, which is the bottom portion of the circle where there's a lot of green and blue. So this is where we did our drive testing, which is why I'm pointing it out. It looks like CHP experienced a lot of LTE roaming in the Stockton area, and so that's where we drove. If we skip to the next slide, there are some interesting results. So these are 3 different plots. The one on the left is the mobile, a Motorola Mobile 8500. The plot in the middle is a Apex Next portable radio, and we use the Motorola default settings for the Smart Connect. That's when you leave LMR and when you return to LMR. It's based on the received signal strength of the radio. And the chart off to the right is the Apex Next portable with the CHP code plug, which they use their own customized thresholds for Smart Connect on when they leave and return LMR. So the interesting thing is the mobile on the left roamed on LTE. The black spots are the LTE, and we've thrown up a signal strength indicator showing how we, the green is the strong signal and yellow is slightly weaker, and then light blue is even weaker. The black dots are where we've roamed on LTE. So with the mobile radio connected to a cradle point, allowed for LTE roaming with a mobile, but the power output of the mobile is much higher, and it has a rooftop antenna, as opposed to the 2 portable plots where we basically simulated how CHP is using it, which is a Apex Next radio in vehicle. So there's less transmit power. I think at 700 megahertz, those portables put out about 2.5 watts of power, and it's shielded by the vehicle a little bit. So this was encouraging because we saw that if you implement CRIS using a mobile with a rooftop antenna, you would experience much better LMR coverage and much less LTE roaming. And it's worth pointing out that the Smart Connect settings on the CHP portable limit the LMR coverage slightly more. For example, if you look on the i5 coverage, you see the CHP portable roamed on LTE slightly more than the portable with the standard Motorola thresholds. All these recordings were done manually. We had all 3 radios in the vehicle, and we were pushing to talk manually. We had a team of engineers drive testing, and then we had a person back here at headquarters also logging results on lat longs and signal strength levels. If we could go to the next slide. This is a similar picture of, zoom in of the CHP presented map from last time where there was a lot of LTE roaming, which correlates, of course, with the portable Next radio and the CHP Smart Connect thresholds. And in comparison to the plot on the left, where we used a mobile, there was much less roaming. So if you're concerned about roaming on LTE, we recommend using a mobile radio. Next slide, please. So this is interesting. We drove up Highway 49 into the sticks, and the plot on the left is Motorola Mobile connected to a cradle point with Starlink. And so those purple dots across the top, at least they look purple on this projector. On my display, they're pink. But the top portion of the map on the left is where we roamed on Starlink. And I've pointed out that we ended the drive, so it doesn't look like there was any missing data. We basically just turned around at the end of the drive and came back. The plot on the right, without Starlink, indicates that those little red plus signs are where we would have no service. So 2 radios, again, the mobile, where we were able to roam on Smart Connect using satellite, versus the Apex Portable, where we didn't have the option, just experienced no coverage. So next slide. This is a similar map, just comparing where we roamed on, where we were able to use Chris by roaming on Starlink using the Smart Connect feature compared to the no coverage that was identified by CHP. So this was useful. That's the end of agenda item 6.
So any questions from the panel on agenda item 6 and the coverage data that we were able to compile and compare?
I guess quick question on the subscription, hardware, and other considerations involved with a solution like this, and support from OES to integrate it from the end user to LMR, radio top or radio site, Starlink, et cetera, and back to the comm centers. Can you elaborate a little bit on some of the, I guess, infrastructure required from the agencies to do something like this from end to end, in a nutshell?
Yeah, I mean, so that kind of leads into agenda item 7, where we talk about the measurement methodology. But basically, we used the Motorola 8500 specifically because it can accommodate Smart Connect. We tethered it via Ethernet to the cradle point specifically because we have large agencies like CHP that have cradle points in their vehicles already. And then we just added the Starlink component. So presumably if an agency wanted to use Starlink for the Smart Connect feature, you'd have to pay for the Starlink service separately.
Is there subscription cost for Motorola for Smart Connect as well?
Smart Connect is, yeah, there's a feature cost associated with Smart Connect, and it depends on if you're buying that as a single feature or if you're buying it along with other features like Smart Mapping and Smart Locate, Smart Programming. If you have a need for any of those features, then they will bundle like 4 features at a reduced cost. I want to say it's like, geez, don't quote me on this, like $12 per feature per radio.
And then just bring it back to conclusion with the comm centers. What kind of basic infrastructure is required there in order for it to get back to a comm center?
So, I mean, roaming using Smart Connect works kind of transparently to anyone at dispatch. We are looking at, dispatch equipment that would be native to the Motorola system and hopefully providing that to the end user. But even if you already have your own, say, Moducom system and you wanted to attach like a P25 control station, you'd still be able to hear them while they're roaming on satellite. Obviously, this ties into the conversation we had at last Pisser Spec where, some coverage is better than no coverage. So we prefer to keep you on LMR. We allow you to roam on LTE at that point. If there's no LMR coverage, you'd still be able to talk back to your dispatch. And then the Wi-Fi and Starlink are kind of third tier, not as preferable as LTE or LMR coverage.
Thank you. Yeah, I know we'd love the idea of this. I think it's just getting a full grasp of the cost for building up that infrastructure from end to end, from the radio in the user's hand all the way through the infrastructure to our comm centers and back and forth, and the subscriptions and other things involved there. So I think that definitely helps. But it is something to keep in mind as we move forward with Chris and these implementations, that there may not be a user cost at this point, but it's definitely on the agencies to build out this and then have recurring costs for the subscriptions and the whole picture moving forward. Last very quick question is information security concerns with Starlink. Is there anything on the agenda there, or items that were addressed potentially in testing with Starlink specifically?
No, not really. I mean, we've spoken with Motorola about that topic, and I'm pretty comfortable with it, but we don't have anything to present.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions on topic 6? All right. Then we'll move on to topic 7.
So this kind of ties back into Smart Connect. It's the methodology that we used to test. And so we basically had 3 different Motorola radios used to evaluate the CRIS coverage in the sample areas that CHP had previously identified as having frequent roaming on LTE. Those radios were a Motorola 8500 mobile with a cradle point using the Motorola recommended Smart Connect thresholds. A Motorola Apex Next Portable using the same Motorola recommended Smart Connect thresholds, and then the Motorola Apex Next Portable using the CHP Smart Connect thresholds. The push-to-talks were placed on all 3 radios along the test route that I showed you. They were verified for voice quality and successful completion. In other words, we had someone here at headquarters receiving the calls. GPS and corresponding RSSI levels were recorded and mapped for analysis. And then the cradle point and Starlink equipment was integrated with the mobile radio to validate Smart Connect in limited coverage areas. That's all for agenda item 7.
Right. Any questions from the panel on item 7? All right. Thank you. We'll move to agenda item 8, which is the CRIS coverage maps.
So these maps, we try and keep them updated on the web, but you will not see the one on the right on the web, which is the future coverage. So currently on the left, you'll see that we have roughly 77 sites on the air. I say roughly because that includes sites being turned up in November, and I think we have one scheduled for December. So those are included in the 77 site count. There's a breakdown of the VHF sites. There's 20 of those, 77 are VHF, and 57 of them are 700 megahertz. And this plot was created using a cutoff of neg 105 dBm. You probably saw on one of the earlier slides that the sensitivity of the Motorola radios is closer to like neg 122, neg 123 dBm. We don't use that figure. Our green would be a much larger blob on the map if we did, but we find that you would be talk-in limited or uplink limited at that point. Your portable radio would not be able to reach back to the mountaintop at the fringe of the network if we did that. So we cut off the coverage at neg 105 under the assumption that your portable should be able to still reach back into the system at that level. So the plot on the right is the same 77 sites and the future planned sites, increasing the count to 124 sites. It's hard to see on such a small map. I do have blow-ups in the next upcoming slides. So if you want to skip to the next slide. This is a list of the sites that are planned. So there's 47. If you do the math, we had 77 by the end of the year 2025. We have planned 124. Leaves about 47 planned sites. This is the list of the planned sites and a map showing the planned sites in red. You'll see a cluster right there in Nevada County. We do have an agreement with Nevada County similar to the Mono County agreement. So we've got 9 sites going into that area, which accounts for the high number of red dots in that general vicinity. If we want to skip ahead to the next slide. So this is a blow up of the Northern California sites. I would say that this is the current coverage in Northern California. And the next slide would show you the existing plus the planned sites in Northern California. The sites built in the outskirts, in other words, up there by the Oregon, Medford, Klamath Falls area, those are like the VHF sites. We build VHF sites in the rural areas for the extended propagation that we get out of those. And then in the cities, we typically stick with the 700 megahertz. It's better planning not to intermingle them as best as possible. So we keep the VHF on the outskirts. Also, spectrum availability comes into play. And the next slide is the Southern California current coverage. And the last slide is the Southern California current plus planned coverage.
David, can you give us a timeline on the plan?
Yeah, so the 47 sites that are in planning, we're typically building out at a pace of 12 to 15 sites per year. So we've purchased the infrastructure, so even if the BCP ends and we have 10 sites left over, we should still be able to get those installed. So 2.5 to 3.5 years. And that's the end of agenda item 8, if there's other questions.
Any questions from the panel on agenda item 8? No. All right. Okay, thank you, David, for your presentation.
You're welcome.
And we will move on to the next agenda item, which is a call for any future agenda items the panel might like to see on the agenda, and then to call out the dates for the upcoming meetings in 2026. So do I have any agenda items that the panel might like to see added to the agenda in those future meetings?
I'm assuming we can always submit requests as
Yes.
opportunities arise.
Yes, you may do so. Yeah, the board meeting liaison, Samantha Barton, has her email address available and will receive any of those kinds of requests to add items.
Steve, if we could just, and we discussed on it earlier, but as was mentioned, we're running out of time trying to get those BCP conversations going.
Mhm.
Can we have a estimation as to what they would be, can give for costs? Do we need
Oh, for subscription fees?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, you mentioned before, those numbers were ran years ago, haven't been done in quite a while.
Mhm.
I probably have more information now. But I know, 3 years seems like a long time now, but we all know
Yeah.
in our world it's not.
Yeah. Yeah, so, I'll take an action item back, get the team to develop what we're looking at. Obviously, it will be based on some assumptions, and limited data, because today's user base isn't necessarily the future user base. But again, the same principles apply, is we'll take the operating costs, we'll take the user base, and we'll make sure that we're doing everything we can to keep that dollar amount as low in that range as possible, because we do want it to be affordable. So yes, and so I think probably what would be good is to maybe have it as an agenda item for the next one in February. And that should be a pretty good timing as far as, where you're at in the budget cycle. You might be looking at concept papers at that point, and so it could help you inform that kind of thing.
Appreciate it.
All right. Any other questions or comments on this agenda item? All right. In that case, we'll move to agenda item number 10. This is the opportunity for public comment for matters that are not on the agenda. We'll start, of course, with the public who is here in the room. Is there anyone in the room who has a public comment they would like to make? All right, seeing none, we will then turn our attention online. Is there any public member online who would like to make a comment for an item not on the agenda? Seeing and hearing none, we will then move on to the next agenda item, which is the last agenda item, where we will adjourn the meeting for this year. Thank you, everybody, for your participation. Like I said, we committed to trying to make this a more useful and engaging conversation, so I look forward to your continued engagement in the new year. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you.